Spring Television. Ours it is.
Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Kosovo closes biggest border with Serbia after Belgrade places broader troops on high alert. United Nations says at least 17,831 civilians have been killed since the Russia-Ukraine war began. South Korea Defense Ministry announces it will spend 560 billion won on improving the country's air defenses. My name is Damilola Raphael. Kosovo has closed its biggest border crossing after protesters blocked it on the Serbian side to support their ethnic kin in Kosovo and refusing to recognize the country's independence. Today's move has left only 3 entry points between the two countries open, with 2 other crossings on the Serbian border closed by similar protests on their Kosovo side since December 10. The latest protest comes hours after Serbia said it had put its army on the highest possible level of alert following weeks of escalating tensions between Belgrade and Pristina. It was reported that Serbs in Serbia used the truck and tractors yesterday to create the latest roadblock close to the Madeira crossing on Kosovo's eastern border. About 50,000 Serbs living in ethnically divided northern Kosovo refused to recognize the government in Pristina or the status of Kosovo as a country separate from Serbia. Earlier, Serbian President Vučić, unenthusiastic over resolution of the tensions, blamed Pristina for not accepting constructive arguments. Russia has debunked Kosovo's accusation that it was somehow stoking tensions in an attempt to sow chaos across the Balkans. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov denied Pristina's accusation, stating that it was wrong to search for a destructive Russian influence. Peskov said Serbia, as a sovereign country, can protect the rights of Serbs who live in such difficult conditions and naturally reacts harshly when these rights are violated. He stated that having a very close historic and spiritual relationship with Serbia, Russia will closely monitor the situation, adding that Moscow supports Serbia's attempts to protect ethnic Serbs. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has disclosed that 17,831 civilians have died in Ukraine since the war began. It recorded a total of 6,884 civilians killed, including 2,719 men, 1,832 women, 175 girls and 216 boys, as well as 38 children and 1,904 adults whose sex is yet unknown. A total of 10,947 have been injured, with most in Donetsk and Luhansk region, where 4,052 civilians have been killed and 5,643 injured. The office warned that the actual figures are considerably higher as the receipt of information from some locations where intense hostilities have been going on has been delayed, and many reports are still pending corroboration. Russia and China have completed naval drills in the East China Sea after a week of joint exercises, which included practicing how to capture an enemy submarine. The Maritime Interaction 2022 exercises included Russia's Pacific Fleet and were carried out in waters off Zhoushan and Taizhou in China's Zhejiang province from December 21 to December 27. The Russia's Defense Ministry said detachments of warships of the Pacific Fleet and the naval forces of the People's Liberation Army of China have completed practical tasks within the framework of the bilateral naval exercise. The ministry added that ships from the two countries, with the support of anti-submarine aviation, jointly searched for a submarine of a conditional enemy and fired a volley of jet depth charges. Chinese leader Xi Jinping is due to speak to Russian President Vladimir Putin before the end of the year. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murdering Stratford Town player Cody Fisher, who was stabbed to death in a nightclub dance floor in Birmingham. The 23-year-old, who was a non-league footballer and school sports coach, was attacked at the Crane nightclub just before midnight on Boxing Day. Paying tribute, his family said his death had broken their hearts. A 22-year-old man was arrested in Birmingham just after midnight, while a second man, who is 21 years, was arrested in London. West Midlands Police said it had been pleased with the public response and had received photos and statements which were helping the investigation. Stratford Town's chairman, Jed McCrory, told Sky News that everyone is devastated by the news and described Fisher as a talented footballer and a lovely young man.
Everybody knows, everybody who's spoken to one of the young kids, they all know each other. It's going to be a hard one to take, this, for everybody. Everyone at this club, he was so well liked.
And a message for his family?
Just speechless. Just anything we could do to help, we'll do. I'm just so sorry for him.
Spanish government has appointed a new ambassador to Venezuela, signaling a soar in relations that comes 2 years after Madrid vacated the post to protest what it said was the absence of free elections in the Caribbean country. Following the 2018 presidential election, Spain recognized opposition leader Juan Guaido as interim president and distanced itself from the government of Nicolas Maduro, culminating in the recall of its top envoy to Caracas in November 2020. The new appointment announced today heralds a change in that stance within the context of the ongoing political talks in Mexico between Venezuela's government and opposition groups. A foreign ministry spokesperson disclosed that there are new circumstances that make it advisable to raise Spain's representation in Venezuela to the level of ambassador. Pope Francis has called for prayers for his predecessor, Benedict XVI, saying he is very sick. Francis made the surprise appeal today at the end of his general speech, giving no details. He asked for special prayers for the Pope Emeritus Benedict, who, he said, was sustaining the church in silence. Benedict, 95 years old, resigned from his post due to advancing age in 2013 and became the first pope in about 600 years to do so. He has been living in the Vatican since then. In Africa, Angola's Supreme Court has ordered the preventive seizure of assets worth about $1 billion held by Isabel dos Santos, the daughter of its former president. According to Portuguese news agency, the court document said authorities had evidence of alleged embezzlement and money laundering and orders the seizure of the money dos Santos holds in all banking institutions. The seizure also includes all of dos Santos' shares in Angolan company Bao Vidro, as well as 100% of shares in Cape Verde's telecom company Unitel T-Plus and Unitel STP in Sao Tome and Principe. Dos Santos, once Africa's richest woman, has faced corruption accusations. In 2019, Angola's Supreme Court ordered the seizure of her assets for allegedly steering state funds to companies in which she held stakes during her father's presidency. In November, Global Police Agency Interpol issued a red notice for Dos Santos, asking global law enforcement authorities to locate and provisionally arrest her. Outside Africa, Benjamin Netanyahu's incoming hardline Israeli government has put settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank at the top of its priorities list a day before it is set to be sworn into office. Netanyahu's Likud party released the new government's policy guidelines today, the first of which promises to advance and develop settlement in all parts of the land of Israel. The commitment could put the new government on a collision course with Israel's closest allies, including the United States, which opposes settlement construction on occupied territories. Israel, in 1967, captures the Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem, Galilee, Negev, Golan Heights, and Judea and Samaria, the biblical names for the occupied Palestinian West Bank. You are watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We will be right back after this break.
According to the words of Michael Forbes, one who never asks questions either knows everything and nothing. Watch me as I ask the questions you think no one wants to answer. Even questions it appears no one has got the guts to ask. My name is Femi Adifula and I've got the gut. Let's ask the pertinent questions and watch as we get answers.
You're welcome back. South Korea Defense Ministry has announced the country will spend 560 billion won on improving its defenses against drones after a military scare from the north that set off jitters in Seoul. On Monday, 5 North Korean drones entered the South's airspace, prompting the military to scramble fighter jets and attack helicopters. But the South's response failed to bring down any of the drones, prompting an angry statement from President Yoon Suk-yeol and an apology from the military. Under South Korea's newly unveiled budget, the country aims to spend 331.4 trillion won in all on defense until 2027, with an average annual increase of 6.8%. On Wednesday, Yoon said any provocation by North Korea must be met with retaliation without hesitation despite its nuclear weapons. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has unveiled new goals for his country's military on the second day of a key meeting of the ruling Workers' Party, which hints at another year of intensive weapons tests and regional tension. On day 2 of the meeting, Kim revealed the newly created challenging situation on the Korean Peninsula and the broader political landscapes. Kim also set the direction for the anti-enemy struggle and goals for reinforcing self-defense in 2023. He specified the principles of foreign affairs and the direction of the struggle against the enemy, adding that the party and government must thoroughly abide by in order to protect sovereign rights and defend national interests. One person died during a highway pileup involving hundreds of vehicles in central China, with images of the accident showing scenes of chaos. Aerial pictures showed hundreds of passenger cars, vans, and lorries, many of which had smashed into one another, piled up on one section of the highway in dense fog. State media reported that the accident occurred due to low visibility from fog near the city of Zhengzhou, Henan province, and involved at least 200 vehicles. Zhengzhou Traffic Police said on their official social media account that traffic on the flyover had resumed as of this afternoon. Emergency rescue efforts were carried out soon after the accident occurred. The United Nations Security Council has denounced Taliban government policies targeting women and girls in Afghanistan. The Taliban have banned women from attending university and working for non-governmental organizations within the last week. The 15-member Security Council said it was deeply alarmed by the increasing restrictions on women's education. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the latest restrictions must be revoked. Mr. Guterres said that the latest restrictions were unjustifiable human rights violations. A statement from the Security Council called for the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women and girls in Afghanistan. A United States judge has denied a request to sanction Kari Lake, the Republican candidate in Arizona's gubernatorial race, over allegations she made when questioning the legitimacy of the state election. Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Peter Thompson, however, did rule that Lake be responsible for paying more than $33,000 to her rival, Democrat Katie Hobbs, for expenses incurred through expert witnesses and ballot inspections. Hobbs had filed a motion to sanction Lake, a vocal election denier, for claims she described as groundless and not made in good faith. The decision comes days after Thompson threw out a lawsuit that Lake filed to contest her narrow defeat in November's race for governor.
Hobbs has absolutely no respect for the law. I can't even believe that she didn't recuse herself from this botched election. And I now see why. She didn't even campaign. She didn't debate. She hid from people, hid in her basement, had no policy because she knew that she could rig the election and walk into office. And I'm telling you what, Steve, if we don't get serious about turning our elections around and restoring order and reforming them, we're not going to have a country much longer. You said we're 45 seconds to midnight. When it comes to our country, that's exactly where we are if we have rigged elections. And the fact that they want to say I had no merit with this lawsuit, I am standing up for the people of this state, the people who were done wrong on Election Day, and the millions of people who live outside of Maricopa County, whose vote was watered down by this bogus election in Maricopa County. The people of Arizona want me to stand up for them and get some answers as to what happened in our election.
The death toll in the New York city of Buffalo has risen to 28, with thousands still without power amidst the monster winter storm that has battered North America. Across the United States, at least 62 people have died in weather-related incidents. In Buffalo, state officials said military police are being brought in to help manage traffic in the city, where a driving ban remains in place. Looting has been reported in the parts of the city during the emergency. The winter storm has also forced the cancellation of thousands of flights, including about 4,800 yesterday morning alone, while thousands of passengers have been left stranded at airports across the country. Conditions are now expected to improve, with very little snowfall yesterday and slightly warmer weather on the way. At a news conference, officials in New York's Erie County, which includes Buffalo, said the death toll is expected to rise as search and rescue operations continue.
I just want to add that people who are out looting when people are losing their lives in this harsh winter storm is just absolutely reprehensible. I don't know how these people can even live with themselves, how they can look at themselves in the mirror. They are the lowest of the low. And from some of the pictures that we've seen in social media of these looters, they're not looting foods and medicines. They're just looting items that they want. So these aren't even people in distress. These are people that are taking advantage of a natural disaster and the suffering of many in our community to take what they want from retailers, also potentially putting those services at risk in the communities where they are living.
In business, Russia has said it did not consult with OPEC Plus on its response to a price cap on Russian oil. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov disclosed this in a press briefing, stating that it was Russia's sovereign right to respond as it sees fit to such illegal measures. On Tuesday, Putin delivered Russia's response to the Western enforced price cap, signing a decree that bans crude oil and oil product supply from February 1 for 5 months to nations that abide by the cap. Peskov said contacts between Russia and the OPEC Plus group of leading global oil producers, which includes Russia, were ongoing on other issues. Apple and Tesla stocks have dropped over growing concerns about delays in their production lines in China. Apple shares hit their lowest point since June 2021, while Tesla's stock dropped 73% from a record high in November 2021. Companies have struggled to keep production going in China due to COVID restrictions and weeks of lockdowns. Now, they are facing a staffing crisis as China battles a COVID wave after lifting years of restrictions. Global investors are being cautious ahead of additional interest rate hikes, a global economic slowdown, and ongoing war in Ukraine. In sports, Cody Gakpo has arrived in England for a medical ahead of his expected move from PSV Eindhoven to Liverpool. On Boxing Day, the Dutch club announced that Liverpool had reached an agreement to sign Gakpo for a fee between £35 million and £45 million. Liverpool's rivals, Manchester United, were interested in Gakpo in the summer when they instead signed Antony from Ajax, but reports suggested they were considering a move for the Netherlands international in the upcoming January transfer window. Gakpo's stock increased at the World Cup with 3 goals in 5 appearances before the Netherlands were knocked out at the quarterfinal stage on penalties to Argentina. And before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. Kosovo has closed its biggest border crossing after protesters blocked it on the Serbian side to support the ethnic king in Kosovo in refusing to recognize the country's independence. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has disclosed that 17,831 civilians have died in Ukraine since the war began. South Korea Defense Ministry has announced the country will spend 560 billion won on improving its defenses against drones after a military scare from the north that set off jitters in Seoul. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. I am Damilola Raphael. Thanks for watching. Good evening.